Hi, my name is Annie Vigil. I'm a second year law student at Penn State Law and am participating in the Manglona Lab for Gender and Economic Equity. For one of the lab's projects, Witnesses to Her Story, we are capturing women's personal experiences in education, sports, and the workforce, focusing on the 1960s and 70s. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Linda Trout. Linda served as Idaho's first female state Supreme Court justice and later as Idaho's first female Chief Justice. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
All right, so to start off, let's talk about your childhood. Where were you born and raised?
I was actually born in Tokyo, Japan, and brought over to the United States at about age 2 and was raised in Boise. That's basically where I grew up and have come back since about 1992. There's a space that I didn't live here, but primarily Boise.
And then who lived in your home growing up?
My mom and dad and me. I had an older sister, but she was quite a bit older. And so she was away at school. So she'd come occasionally on vacations and that sort of thing, but primarily just the three of us.
Did either of your parents work outside of the home?
Yes, my dad did. He was a pediatrician. My mother may have, I don't know. Certainly during the time that I could remember growing up, she was a stay-at-home mom.
And did your parents have expectations for you and your siblings, such as doing chores around the house?
Oh yeah. I had to earn my allowance. I mowed the lawn sometimes. I did ironing for the family. Of course, helped my mom cook and set the table and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I had responsibilities.
Did your father help with any of the activities around the house, or was it primarily your mother?
No, he did. Of course, he was at work all day. But in the evenings, he would help with cooking and setting the table. On the weekends, um, he would help with, in fact, probably did most of the yard work, hauling out trash, that sort of thing. But yeah, he definitely helped.
Awesome. Moving towards your early education, you attended school in the late 1950s and 1960s for high school, elementary, and middle school, correct?
That's correct. Unfortunately, yes.
Did you enjoy school?
Yeah, I did. Um, Fortunately, I was a good student and a good learner and enjoyed the subjects. So yeah, I enjoyed school, and obviously I enjoyed the social interaction with my friends like that too.
Did the Boise schools have a dress code then?
I'm sure they did, because I can remember when I graduated from high school, it was a really big deal toward the end of my senior year that we got to wear pants. Prior to that, we were expected to wear dresses and skirts. So I'm sure there was some kind of policy. I just couldn't tell you exactly what it said.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember if there were dress restrictions for the boys at school?
I don't remember. I'm sure, again, there probably were, but I don't recall.
And do you remember when, like you said, that transition into wearing pants? Do you remember what that was like?
Oh, it was thrilling. It was just so exciting to be able to wear pants and shorts. It was only a brief period of time in high school that we were able to do that. Obviously, at that point, it changed significantly for everybody following. And there were restrictions when I went to college as well.
And did you participate in any extracurriculars while you were in school?
Oh, yes. I was on the drill team. I was in Scarlet Skirts, which was sort of the support for the athletic boys' activities. I was in French club. Uh, yeah, all kinds of things like that.
Great. Do you remember if sports such as basketball or soccer or track and field were an opportunity for the girls to participate in?
Well, of course, we did it in PE class, but I assume you mean other than that. Tennis, I was on the tennis team. I don't recall having a track team. There was soccer was unknown. The boys had a golf team, but the girls did not. It was pretty limited. Drill team was really probably considered to be the athletic event for girls.
Mhm. And did most of your peers participate in that with you?
Quite a lot of them. We had a pretty good sized drill team. Um, yeah, and I don't know what else they would have been doing. So probably a third of my class, I would guess, probably participated in some way in drill team and activities like that.
Did you have any role models while you were in school?
Hmm. No, not not through high school. No.
What were your parents' expectations of you when it came to your education?
That I was going to college. There was no question about that. And I don't mean that in a mean way, ordering me to do something. It just was expected. And from as long as I could remember, they always talked about setting money aside and what career plans I had, where I might want to go to school or get my college degree. It just was accepted that that's what I was going to do.
Do you think that that was a popular expectation for your friends or your peers?
You mean, do I think others probably had the same kind of expectations?
Yes.
A few did, um, but probably not a majority. And within my peer group, yes, they probably did. Probably most of us had expectations that we were going to go on to college. But if I look at my class entirely, I don't think a majority of them had those kinds of expectations put on them.
Do you remember what you wanted to be growing up?
Well, starting in probably high school, I would say is the first recollection I have of really thinking about a career and something I might want to do. And I decided that I wanted to be an interpreter at the UN. There was a movie then with Audrey Hepburn called Charade, in which she was an interpreter at the UN. And I think that probably motivated me a lot. It just seemed like a really cool, exotic job. And so I went to college and I started out majoring in French. And I had every intention of doing that.
And so, moving towards your college education, you graduated in high school in 1969, and then you attended college right after that, correct?
Correct.
Perfect. And you said that you went in studying French. I know that later you graduated with an English major and a minor in French. What made you make that change?
At the time I started college, anyone who wanted a Bachelor of Arts degree had to take 2 years of a foreign language. So when I got there, the class was filled with a whole bunch of people who hated French and had no intention of ever using it, but had to have it as a graduate requirement. So I did that for 2 years, and it was just painful to sit there through these classes with a whole bunch of people who had no interest in the subject. And I think finally I came to the realization that it was probably impractical for me to think that I was going to go to New York and go to the UN and suddenly become this interesting interpreter. So I think I kind of came to my senses and really didn't know at that point what I did want to do. And I love to read. So it just seemed natural to switch over to English because I figured English was a major that I could use for a lot of different careers. And so it kept my options open. And I had enough credits in French by that point that I just ended up minoring in French.
Can you tell me a little bit more about why it felt impractical to pursue trying to go to New York and trying to pursue that kind of job?
Because I wasn't very good at French. And I don't know, with maturity, I think it's not that I couldn't have done it and probably would have loved going to New York. It wasn't that. It was just, did I really think it was practical to expect that I would be able to go back to the UN and suddenly get this wonderful job with what would amount to about 11 years of high school and college French? It just didn't seem realistic at that point, and so that's why I scrapped it.
Okay, and you said that pursuing English was something that you thought would fit a lot of different jobs. What kind of career were you thinking about pursuing then?
I didn't have anything in mind, much to my father's chagrin, because he kept encouraging me to think of a career or something that I might do with my college degree. But I really, for 2 years, sophomore and junior years, I really didn't. I was just kind of looking around, trying to decide, did I want to teach? Did I want to, go into a different path? But by the time I was a senior, I started thinking about law school. And in fact, talked to my counselor about what classes I should take. And he said that staying with an English major made as much sense as a lot of other majors. It would certainly come in handy if that's what I decided to do. So I was kind of focusing at that point in time, but no serious decisions.
Mhm. And before we move on to law school, what was the makeup of your undergraduate courses? Was it pretty evenly split between men and women attending college then?
It seems that way. It really seems that way. And I mean, I think back on classes, I think back on the sororities and fraternities, and they all seemed pretty evenly numbered. There may have been more men, but it didn't seem that way. Certainly not overwhelming numbers.
And when you were in a sorority, was there a popular major that most of the other sorority girls were going into, or careers that what they were seeking at the time?
This would be just a guess, and
Mhm.
I would say probably teaching, probably the majority of them, but gosh, there were people in math and other kind of science classes. I mean, it was spread out, but I would say if there were one that more than any others, it would probably have been teaching.
Okay. And then you graduated from your undergrad in 1973. What did you do after graduation?
I went to Portland because my sister was living there. Um, I wasn't sure yet about law school. And I felt like that was a serious commitment. And if I was going to do that, I needed to be fully on board and motivated to do that. So I thought taking a year off would be a good idea. So as I say, I went to Portland and uh, I searched for a job. I eventually found one. I was a ward clerk on a hospital floor. I was the person who ordered supplies and ordered tests and made sure that the supply room was stocked and those sorts of things, which turned out to be a really good job because I immediately decided I did not want to do that for the rest of my life. And I kind of looked around to see if there were other things that would be interesting. And after a few months, I decided that law school really looked pretty darn good and pretty interesting, and that probably would be the best choice.
Did you talk through that decision with anyone? Did anyone help you make that decision?
My dad, because I needed finance help.
Mhm.
um, him primarily, and not just because he was going to fund it, but I had a really good rapport with my dad, and I trusted his judgment. And so we had conversations. I asked him point blank, "What do you think? I'm thinking about going to law school." He was thrilled. He said, "Oh, that's a great idea." Um, and I may have talked to my cousins who were attorneys. I may have talked to them as well to say, do you like what you do? Does this seem like a good career, and so on. But that was it.
And with your cousins or anyone else, did you know any female attorneys when making that decision?
No, did did not know any female attorneys.
Okay, so when you started law school, what was your law school experience like?
Well, I enjoyed the classes. I really enjoyed the people. Um, I would say overall I enjoyed the experience. Um, it was kind of nerve-wracking because law school exams are tough, and the subjects are sometimes hard to understand. And for me, school had always been pretty easy. So to be challenged like that was really different. Um, so I had to work really hard in law school, which isn't necessarily fun, but I would say looking at the overall experience, I enjoyed it and thought that I learned a lot.
And did you attend law school with any of your peers from undergrad, or was it all new people?
Um, there were people from undergrad. Probably most of them, though, were in the class ahead of me, but they were still in law school. But because I had taken a year off, most of them went straight through. Um, but there were, well, I know there were some in my class that I had been to school with as an undergraduate.
Mhm. And who were your professors at the time? Were they mostly male or were they female?
Mostly male, but there were two or three or four, maybe out of 20. Oh boy, that's a wild guess. Something sort of close to that. So there were a few women, but the majority were men.
Mhm. And how about your peers?
There were as many women in my first year law school class as had been in the entire school year before. 1974 was kind of the big change that women started populating medical schools and law schools and all of those things. And University of Idaho was no exception to that. So we had probably 15 women, I would guess, in my class. That, again, that's a real guess, but 15 or 20 in my class, and there had been no more than 15 or 20 in the entire school year before. So it was a really big bump. And the years in the second and third years when I was there, that seemed to hold true. The classes behind me seemed to be more and more women coming into those classes.
How
It
did
wasn't a
people,
fluke.
what was that?
It wasn't a fluke. It was a trend.
How did people react to that change?
Well, if you ask me alone, I would say great. I enjoyed my classmates, male and female, never felt there were any problems at all. But in later years, long after I'd graduated from law school, I heard at least one story about a woman in my class who was told by some of the men that she didn't belong there, that she was taking up a spot that should have been given to a man who had to support his family, and she wasn't and didn't need to be there. That was a shock to me. No one ever said that to me or intimated that I didn't belong there and wasn't an equal to everybody else. So my personal experience was inconsistent with, but I have no reason to question her view of what
Mhm.
happened and how she was treated.
How did it feel hearing about that story many years after graduating law school?
I was shocked, frankly. And maybe I'm just naive, but like I said, my experience was very positive, and I never felt like I didn't belong at law school. Um, so I was shocked that some of my colleagues would say that to one of my fellow female students. I just couldn't believe it. But again, I have no reason to question her. I believe what she said.
During law school, did you have mentorship programs?
Mm, no. Um, I mean, we had things like internships and externships and things like that, but pairing me with someone or someone to advise me or something, no.
Who would you turn to for help in law school?
My fellow students.
Mhm.
Because I mean, the only examples I can think of were I didn't understand some case or something some professor had said. And so the logical thing was to turn to the people that I knew well and liked, who I thought were smart, and ask them, for help and advice and that sort of thing.
Okay, you graduated law school in 1977, and then you began in private practice, correct?
Correct.
What was the process like when you first began searching for a job?
Well, I initially I had planned on moving back to Boise and going in with my family firm. Then I met the person who became my husband, and he had 2 more years of law school. So in the spring of my senior year, I was out going to various law firms in Moscow, where the university is, and Lewiston, looking for a job. So I just hit every law firm I could find in those two towns and some individual attorneys, single practice attorneys, and just went in and interviewed, and luckily ended up getting hired by one of them in Lewiston.
Do you remember the interview process and what it was like if they asked you any personal questions, such as if you were married or if you were thinking about starting a family?
I don't remember any questions like that. The question about me being married or getting married, I probably volunteered that by saying, I want to stay in the area because my husband to be is still in law school. But no, I don't remember any other personal, private questions like that. I vaguely recall the interview, at the law firm that hired me. And it was entirely wanting a writing sample. What classes did I enjoy? What did I think I might want to do as an attorney? General questions you would ask of a soon-to-be attorney.
And when did you and your husband get married?
4 months after I graduated from law school, within days of finding out that I'd passed the bar exam and that I had gotten a job.
That's so exciting.
It was very exciting and a relief.
Were most of your peers during law school or when starting as an associate, were they married as well?
No, in law school, most were not.
Hmm.
But within a year or two of graduation, I would say that probably changed and the majority were married at that point.
And then how did you and your husband decide where to live?
Well, initially it was really easy because he was in law school and I wanted to be nearby. We made a decision. As you probably know, it's about 30 miles between Lewiston and Moscow, and there's a hill in between. And he very kindly agreed that we should live in Lewiston where my job was, and that he would do the traveling on snow and ice and bad roads and so on. So that was the motivation for living in Lewiston. And the plan was then, when he graduated, to go back or to go to Boise. He was from North Idaho. But after 2 years, by the time he graduated, we loved Lewiston. I was a partner in the law firm. He was able to find a job with the prosecuting attorney's office. We'd bought a house, and we just decided that we really enjoyed Lewiston and we would just stay there.
All right. And then during private practice, what type of law were you practicing?
I would say general, pretty much anything that walked in the door: divorces, probates, collections, civil suits of all kinds. Pretty general practice. Some criminal cases.
And then did you enjoy working in private practice?
I did, but I was always worried that the next client would not come through the door. I always worried about whether or not I was going to be able to keep up with my draws so that I could survive and buy food. It just was a really an uncertain profession, it seemed to me. And I ended up, as you probably know, becoming a judge after about 5.5 years. So by the time I would have reached a point where I had some stability and a client base that I could count on, by that time I had decided to become a judge. And so I never really got to that point. So I recall a lot of worry about whether or not I was going to be able to support myself and my husband. But other than that, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed my partners. I enjoyed the challenge of the law, research and writing. Enjoyed that very much.
And how was that transition to working as a judge?
Well, I thought it was great. I I got rid of all of the uncertainty and the worries about whether clients were going to come see me. And I really enjoyed being a judge. I still am. Occasionally I fill in. And it's been a wonderful career. It was the best decision I could have made. Again, I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed my fellow judges. I enjoyed the challenge of the legal issues. from magistrate to district court to Supreme Court, all the way through. There were sometimes different issues and different way challenges, but thoroughly enjoyed it.
Good. And it was 1992 when you became the first the first female Idaho State Supreme Court judge. How did you get that opportunity to be considered?
I applied. One of the members of the court decided that he wanted to be a magistrate in the federal court system. So the position came open midterm. And I had several people talk to me about whether I would consider being on the Supreme Court. And the governor at the time, Governor Andrus, came out and said that it was long overdue to have a woman on the Supreme Court, and he would really like to appoint one. So I thought, well, when are you going to get an invitation from the governor? Not me personally, but women in general. So I just decided I loved what I was doing. I was a district judge at that point, loved it. And I thought, this is the perfect situation. I can't lose. If I get the job, how great is that? And if I don't, I get to continue on as a district judge doing trial work that I really enjoyed. So that was the thought process.
How did it feel fulfilling that role of the first woman to be on the Idaho State Supreme Court?
Well, I think there's pressure because I feel like people were looking at me to see, could a woman really do this? Which is kind of stupid, but I felt like because they had never seen one in Idaho, that there was a lot of pressure to see if I could do it. And if I would make a big change in the court by suddenly there's this woman on there, is that going to throw everything into chaos and confusion or something? So I felt like people were watching me to see how I would do. And so there was some pressure from that standpoint, but no pressure at all from the other members of the court. I felt welcomed and treated totally as an equal.
Mm-hmm. During my research, I found a little excerpt from the Lewiston Tribune that said shortly after you were selected as a Supreme Court justice that you sat or heard a case that involved old case law that allowed a man to sue for the taking of his wife.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like hearing that case?
Well, it was interesting. Because it was hard to imagine that at that point in time that kind of a law could even still be on the books. And I will say that the other members of the court, and I think by that time there was another woman on the court with me, so I think it was 3 men and 2 women. No one disagreed with the opinion that we should get rid of that and say that there was no basis at all for that law, and it was unenforceable. It was just accepted. It wasn't like this sudden groundswell of, oh my gosh, all of these hundreds of years of law are suddenly going to change. Everybody pretty much accepted that that was ridiculous and it shouldn't exist.
So you said shortly after you were appointed, there was another woman appointed as well. So it sounds like it was a pretty quick transition. Were the reactions of the community still tentative, or were they very accepting once that happened?
I feel like they were very accepting, but if you factor later things that occurred, that may not necessarily be the case. What I'm referring to is that she lost in a contested election to a man who ran against her. And so it was back to one woman on the court. I retired in 2007, and it was 10 years before we had another woman on the court. So while I would say that Kathy was accepted and the idea of having a woman on the court was not remarkable, there were still things that she faced, and I think the court faced. It wasn't accepted. It wasn't just like, well, it's a done deal now. Of course, we're always going to have women on the court. And in fact, to this date, I'm still the only woman who has been Chief Justice. There are 2 women on the court right now. There's a possibility for a third. I have to believe that this is going to change before too long. But that's been, what, 16, well, longer than that, almost 20 years since we've had a female Chief Justice. And that's just wrong.
Mm. Wow. I was going to ask, how did it make you feel that you had made this headway and then there was a 10-year gap where no women were in the court?
I don't know, disgusted, annoyed, disappointed. But I guess if I want to be fair to the governors, there were not a lot of women applying. Mm-hmm. You got to have women apply if you're going to appoint them. That has since changed over the last 5 to 10 years, probably. There are far more women now applying for judicial positions, which is terrific. But it still did not make me happy that there was this long period of time that there were no women on the state's highest court.
Earlier, you mentioned that over time, you did start developing role models. Who became your role models?
Well, the most prominent one that I can think of probably is kind of odd, but Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. Odd in the sense that we weren't colleagues working on the same court. She was not a boss to me. Some of the relationships that you would typically think of as a mentor. But I had the privilege of meeting her and in fact, introducing her before a lecture, and saw her on a number of different occasions and had an opportunity to visit with her. And I just thought she was wonderful. And obviously read a number of her opinions. And just in visiting with her, I just thought that's how I want to be. I want to conduct myself the way she does. She was gracious and warm, but very bright, very assertive. And I just thought she was a wonderful person. So I look at her as somebody that I really thought was a role model.
And then when you became Chief Justice in 1997, what was that experience like?
It was terrific. I loved being the chief. We were able to do a lot of things, improvements, I've thought, in the court system, and to be, not that I would take credit for it, but to be an agent of change, somebody who participated in it, was really exciting and a wonderful opportunity. I laugh because right when I was first appointed, an attorney that I had known for years and liked, very nice guy, came up to me and asked me what I wanted to be called. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, we've always had men, chief justices, and we all call him chief. That's just what you call the chief justice." And he said, "But I don't know, should I call you chief?" And I said, "I think that's a unisex term. I think it's entirely appropriate to call me chief." And he said, "Okay, great, chief, I will." I laugh at that. It was so genuine and sincere and didn't want to offend me, but wasn't really sure if that was the appropriate name. So I think there was some of that adjustment, that we have a woman in that position now, but by and large, I felt well accepted. I didn't feel like people were looking down their nose like, "Oh, she can't really do this." And I hope that in the almost 8 years that I was chief, that I demonstrated to people that women, yes, very definitely could be chief, and it was not causing chaos or any problems.
Um, during the peak of your career, were most of your close friends, were they other attorneys? Were they pursuing other careers in their lives?
I guess I had a combination.
Mhm.
Um, Probably fewer attorneys because in Lewiston, it's a pretty small community, and I had to be careful about ethically being good friends with the people who appeared before me. So I tried to be careful about that. Um, but I had a wide variety. To this day, one of my very good friends is an attorney. Um, but other people were in journalism, stay-at-home parents, just a nurse. I mean, a broad mixture of different people.
Mhm. And your husband was an attorney as well at this time, correct?
Correct.
How did you and your husband balance your time with both being very busy, I'm sure, and some of things like the housework or just maintaining your home? How did you guys balance that?
Well, it got easier when I became a judge because my schedule became a lot more predictable. Is, in other words, when I could go home, what I did on the weekends, those kinds of things. But we shared cooking obligations. It was kind of whoever was home. Um, he took over the dinner preparations when I became a district judge and was handling cases in Orofino. So every time I was gone during the day, that was his day to step in and do the cooking. Um, Lawn activities were shared. It was pretty much a partnership because both of us were working. So it really didn't work for either one of us to say, well, I have to work, so you should go do this. So it was a pretty good partnership.
Did others ever push an expectation of you to stay at home?
No, no, I can't eat. Thinking back of family members, no. Everyone fully expected that I would have a career and that I would be out in the workplace and would not give that up or change my direction or whatever in order to stay home. No.
Okay, and then you retired from being a justice in 2007. You said you still fill in the courts. What other things do you do now, being retired?
I'm chair of the board of directors for the U of I Foundation. I'm on the Blue Cross of Idaho board of directors. I'm a commissioner on the Public Defense Commission. Um, and then I'm not doing them right now, but I've done a variety of homeowners association board, country club board, just various things. I just try to do a mix of different things that I enjoy, and I try to stay busy. I I play some golf and pickleball, but I couldn't make a steady diet of that. And the reason I've continued to be a senior judge is because I like the mental challenge and staying current with the law. I really enjoy that. So I try to do things that challenge me in different ways, physically and mentally.
Have you seen a lot of changes with the law in Idaho over all these years?
Well, um, for a long time, probably not. From the time I graduated um, until, I don't know, 10 years ago, probably. I don't think there certainly were changes, but I don't remember either a lot of change or any really dramatic changes. Um, we'll get off this call and something will immediately pop into my mind, but I can't think of anything at the moment. Over the last 5 to 10 years, it seems like there have been some remarkable changes to Idaho law, particularly in the human rights, personal rights, social issues, things like that. It seems like there have been some pretty dramatic changes.
And can you give me an example of some of those social issues that have changed?
Well, abortion, thanks to the United States Supreme Court and Idaho, in anticipation of that, adopted a number of laws in terms of prohibiting abortion. In the LBGTQ, if I have those all right, area, again, a lot of changes that we had not seen before. Some book banning that I had never seen. And some of it did not occur. Some of it was simply legislation that was proposed, but was not adopted. But just the very discussion and issue, I think is new.
Mhm. So, in light of all of your experiences, what makes you most proud of your younger self?
I think that it's probably what I was able to do, what I made of myself. For someone who really didn't know in high school what I wanted to do, and even through college was not really sure what career path I might follow, I think the fact that I finally figured it out, that I made a success of myself, that I enjoyed it, I found something that I really liked doing. And I think some of the things that I was able to do, particularly as Chief Justice, I'm proud of those. So I'm just in general proud of proud of the life that I have led. Let's put it that way.
Can you share with me one of the things you did as Chief Justice that makes you feel proud?
Yes. In traveling around the state to the various counties, we discovered that there were a lot of occasions when people would come into the courthouse with a legal problem, but no attorney. And they would go to the court clerk's office and say, "Can you help me?" And the answer would be, "No, we can't give legal advice and we can't assist you with your legal problem." And this happened in every single county, all 44. It was a consistent theme that people were coming in and couldn't get help. And it seems, I mean, we all understand the legal system and the requirement for attorneys and so on, but to a lay person going to a county courthouse, you would think you could get help for whatever problem you had. So we set up, first as a pilot program and then ultimately statewide, what we called court assistance offices. So in every county courthouse, there is a person and a place, an office, where people can go and find out and hopefully get direction. Here are attorneys who do pro bono work, so that if you don't have the money to hire them, they will help you. Or we put brochures and pamphlets in about common legal issues and how to perhaps do those yourself. Name change, for example. All of those kinds of things. It was kind of a clearinghouse, so that people who came into the courthouse could be told, "Here's where you need to go," and this person will at least help you in terms of directing you where to go and what you need to do next. I think that was remarkable, that we were able to do it, that the legislature agreed with us and funded it, and that we could find attorneys and people that would staff it and help. I think it's made a huge difference. And I'm really proud of that. That was a really positive change, I think.
That's amazing that you were able to see that need and find a solution for it.
And I should not say that I'm taking credit for myself. I'm not.
Mm.
Um, but yes, we were able to identify the problem, and we were able to go to the legislature and get money for it. So it was a group effort. But
Mhm.
yes, it was wonderful.